Hello and welcome to Produce Talks, the CPMA podcast. I am your host and CPMA Education Manager, Jason Gorley. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, or if you have an Android device, you can go to the Google Play Store and search for Produce Talks. We're in there too. And before we get started with the podcast, I want to let you know that if you are a CPMA member, there is a webinar coming up in January. You can go to elearning.cpma.ca and check it out. Les Mallard will be joining us from Chiquita Brands, and he'll be telling us all about the journey the banana takes from the field all the way to the store. He covers how the banana is grown, planted, harvested, how it's packaged, the journey it takes to get to our local stores, and how it can be marketed there, and some troubleshooting along the way. That's elearning.cpma.ca. Now, this webinar is only available for our CPMA members. So if you're a member, you can sign up there. You can sign up in the CPMA community. If you're not a member, why not become a member? You can check out cpma.ca and check out membership to find out how to become a member of the CPMA. Now, we already announced this month's Fresh Health Award winner on our last podcast, but Selena's here to tell us all about the Fresh Health Award itself. Hi, Selena.
Hi, Jason. Thanks so much for letting me remind everybody of the monthly Fresh Health Award. If you know someone who's promoting the Half Your Plate message or the Fredgie's Children message, just make sure to email me at skarkash@cpma.ca for their chance to be recognized as the monthly Fresh Health winner. And keep your eyes open for a fun Half Your Plate challenge coming soon.
All right, on this month's podcast, this is the second part of a conversation with the media that Ron Lemaire is hosting, summing up 2016 and predictions for 2017. So I will be turning things over to Ron in just a second, but we are joined by
Karen Davidson, editor of The Grower.
Megan Cashty, online editor with Canadian Grocer magazine.
This is Greg Johnson, editor of the Packer newspaper, based in the U.S., covering North American industry.
Marika Hennes, editor with Fresh Plaza, and I am based in the U.S. and focus on news for the U.S. and Canada.
And now, take it away, Ron.
What about the rest of the group? Has there been anything that's really surprised you the most in the value-added category?
It's Karen from the Grower. I guess the one thing I would highlight is what I call, it's the do-it-yourself pickling kit, Sunset Produce here in Canada. It's a fascinating concept because it's the ability for the consumer to take home a jar of greenhouse cucumbers, got the spice package and everything you need to make your own pickles overnight. So I thought that was extremely innovative.
And Karen, what's interesting about that product is it brings back the family element to eating and enjoying your food. Another gap that we're seeing in the North American market, that fast-paced, dynamic family environment where families are not taking the time to go in the kitchen together, prepare a meal. This product actually is a simple way of introducing your kids to how do you pickle.
It's a convenient way to do that, but as you say, it certainly invites some family participation.
This is Megan from Canadian Grocer. Just an interesting thing I thought I would highlight is we had a store recently open in the Toronto area, Pusateri's, and they've actually created a vegetable counter that almost mimics that of a deli counter in that they will chop your vegetables in front of you. And I think that kind of plays a bit to Greg's point about the convenience factor being so appealing to millennials. But having something like that in a grocery retailer to me is interesting because it not only is convenient, it's also provides customization. So you're able to see things be chopped directly in front of you, see what's done, and have it really done to the size or however you want it to be done. So I think that's sort of an interesting extreme case of something that's going on.
I was at the New York Produce Show last week, and I saw a really cool innovation in the onion category. The product is called the Naked Onion, and basically the first layer of the skin has been peeled off, has been dried, and make the product more convenient for the consumer, and at the same time it also extends shelf life quite a bit.
So that's interesting because when you sit down and look at it, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, and also the product doesn't have to involve a dramatic amount of new packaging either.
Exactly. Yeah, and I just thought it was a real cool innovation.
So has anyone seen any of the value-added pieces that really focus on taste and flavor?
It's Karen from The Grower. Well, I would certainly point out all of the innovation in vegetable greenhouse industry And they've done a fabulous job of developing different kinds of tomatoes, in particular, with different flavor profiles and certainly much sweeter profiles for snacking, etc. So I would really highlight all of the work they've done there. And it's not only in the greenhouse vegetable sector, but there's certainly a lot of work being done with strawberries in the greenhouses, and I see that as sort of the next big thing in the greenhouse world.
There's no denying that produce is a global industry. Importing and exporting is something that is essential to meet the demand of a Canadian consumer. It's even more important now as tastes change for a variety of reasons in Canada, such as increase in international travel by Canadians, the influence of culinary TV shows, and a migration of large population and a very diversified cultural mosaic that we're seeing across the country. So Marika, how is this affecting how we see fruit and vegetables sold and marketed in Canada and around the world?
Yeah, what we've been seeing for several years in North America is that many fresh produce items have increasingly become available year-round. And items that used to be rare are now available in large quantities and have become mainstream. Think of avocados, papayas, mangoes. We no longer consider them exotic as each store carries them year-round. And in the past, perhaps 2 mango varieties were available, and nowadays we can choose from close to 10 different varieties in North America that are sourced from 20 different countries. So what we are seeing is that more and more countries are involved in trade. And one of the developments that's driving trade is improved logistics. The other day I talked to a Canadian importer, and he shared with me that the process of importing fresh produce has really been simplified over the years. Airlines have become experienced with handling fresh produce, and sea freight also has improved. And this really helps with building out the assortment. So even rare produce varieties are becoming increasingly easier to import them. I also think produce companies put a lot of effort in meeting consumer demand for year-round supply. A Florida-based importer, they started sourcing rambutans out of Honduras this year, as it allows them to extend their season with 2 months. In the past, they sourced out of Guatemala only, and they had rambutans available for 7 months. But now, by extending with Honduras, they have rambutans available for 9 months out of the year. And it really meets consumer demands, as the consumer prefers availability of the product for a longer time frame.
And now it's time to check in with our sponsor, Nature Fresh Farms. All right, and we have Chris from Nature Fresh on the line. Chris, you're here to tell us all about what's happening with Nature Fresh in 2017.
Well, after another stellar year in 2016, we're already underway in our planning for 2017. Our Greenhouse Education Center, which has done, we did a little over, I think it was 105, 106 events this past year, is back on tap for 2017, traveling throughout the province of Ontario, visiting a variety of Loblaw locations. Is one of our main focal points. The ability to connect directly with the consumer and spend time with them, talking about how we grow, and more importantly, where it's grown. Because again, consumers don't necessarily know how the product is grown, specifically a greenhouse product, and where it's grown. So the initiatives, the education initiative, in order to connect with that consumer, is definitely on the forefront. Products coming to market, we will be having some new items, some new brand items coming into play later this spring that we'll unveil at the CPMA convention and trade show in May. But at the same time, we'll continue to emphasize our education process, but also the nutrition and recipe opportunities with products, and certainly focusing on Ontario-grown products that will be available from Nature Fresh, probably starting the middle of March. We've already started planting our first pepper crops, and our first tomato crops are actually going in at the end of December. So we look forward to 2017.
And now back to the podcast. We are just wrapping up our conversation with Ron Lemaire and the members of the produce media.
So, Marika, it's very interesting, and looking at this wide diversity and variety of products that are coming in, are we seeing this only as an import-export discussion, or Are domestic growers in North America starting to look at how they can take advantage of this consumer demand and leverage new products?
Yeah, that's a good point you're making. And as you already mentioned in your first question, Canada is a very multicultural country. It has one of the highest per capita immigration rates in the world. Asia in particular is Canada's largest source of immigration. That drives really demands for fresh produce in Canada. And since Canada doesn't have a tropical climate, and for many produce varieties, the growing season is too short and the climate isn't warm enough. So certain produce varieties cannot be grown in Canada. But what we're seeing is that some growers in Ontario in particular have started to grow exotic produce. Okra, for instance, is grown in southern Ontario. We're seeing bitter melon also being grown in the same area. North of Toronto in the Holland Marsh area, Asian vegetables are grown as well. And the Vineland Research Centre in Ontario's Niagara region, they partner with growers across the country in developing new crop varieties for really the local ethnocultural marketplace. And they work specifically on okra, long Asian eggplants, and round Indian eggplants. So yeah, we are definitely seeing that development in order to meet consumer demands for local produce.
It's interesting to see connection so closely between the local and the global, and where your thoughts are on how a produce company can be focused on preparing to be global ready. We touch on understanding the marketplace. Is there a space for 5 mangoes in a market as an importer?
I think flavor is definitely key. When it comes to importing, you mentioned, is there room, for instance, for another mango variety? Well, what we're seeing is increasingly mangoes are coming into the U.S. from Australia. I think this is the 3rd season that mangoes from Australia are granted access into the U.S. And it's interesting. It's new varieties. They seem to have a really good taste. And so, yeah, I think there is room as long as flavor is playing a key role here.
Yeah, I'd like to speak a little bit about to the being global ready. And, you know, I just celebrated my 20th anniversary at the Packer this year. And so that means I can compare what I'm seeing now to 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, when we wrote about greenhouse produce in North America, a lot of times it was Dutch produce. And it was really good. It was very high quality, and people liked it. And so what did the North American industry do, particularly the Canadians? They went over to Holland and started hiring their people and learning their technology and started building them in Ontario and British Columbia, and now we have this amazing greenhouse industry in the United States, and it seems like with the new flavor profiles on tomatoes that they haven't found the end of the demand. I mean, it's almost it's incredible, and the reason is because the North American industry responded to that consumer demand. And if you want to just talk about 10 years ago, when you had clementines in December, they were called Spanish clementines. And they don't come from Spain anymore in the U.S. market, in the Canadian market. You know, the citrus companies over here that used to import them started growing them here. I mean, it's a fantastic product. Consumers love it. It's better flavor profile. They're easier to peel. Once you can produce them here, the price points come down. So as consumers show preference for certain fruits and vegetables, the market here always responds.
It's Karen speaking from the grower. When we think about the huge increase of exotic fruit coming into Canada, it certainly puts a lot of pressure on our domestic fruit producers because, as we all know, we've only got a limited season. But I think a really interesting development is what the pear growers have done. In fact, our cover story of the December issue is all about the pear category and the fact that through breeding efforts of the last number of decades, we now have a number of Canadian-bred pears in the Canadian market. And one of the more interesting ones is the cold snap pear, which is now being marketed as a winter pear. The whole idea there is that you can put that pear into storage. It actually improves the flavor profile, and the pear growers can market that right through to the winter time. And so I think that's a little bit of ingenuity in terms of saying we're going to keep, through our breeding and through our storage practices, we're going to be able to extend the life of that pear category.
As I mentioned earlier, Canada depends a lot on importing produce, most specifically from imports that we derive out of the United States, which is our largest trading partner. And to paraphrase a former Canadian Prime Minister who mentioned, living next to the U.S. is in some ways sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly and even tempered is the beast, one is affected by every twitch and grunt. There have certainly been some twitches over this past year, and Canada isn't the only country that may be affected moving forward. So I'd like to ask the group, what is your perspective on global trade of produce over the coming year?
It's Karen from The Grower. If I could just speak a little bit to what's happening here in Canada, I would say that with the Canadian Prime Minister's trip to China this past September, I think there's been a real major pivot to China specifically and Southern Asia generally. And the proof points of that are that the Ontario greenhouse growers, the cucumber growers in particular, are now shipping product to China. We also have been tracking the story of how the BC, the British Columbia cherry growers have done very well in terms of developing the final sanitary protocols to ship to China. And I know that the British Columbia blueberry growers have been a bit slower to get into that export track, but I know that from talking to growers there that they're certainly getting up to speed. And then if you look at all of the various provincial delegations that have been heading to China, I mean, New Brunswick has been there recently putting forward the wild blueberries. And then just a couple of weeks ago, Ontario had an agri-food delegation to India where participants were from the apple and the wine industries. So I think there's been a more outward-looking focus in terms of what Canadian producers can do on export markets.
This is Marika from Fresh Plaza. To stay a little bit closer to home, I think exchange rates are impacting trade. What we're seeing in Canada, for instance, is because of the low value of the dollar, Canadian greenhouse growers, they prefer to export their produce to the United States rather than selling it in Canada. So what we're seeing is in Canada, bell peppers, for instance, that are available at the retail stores are very often sourced in the Netherlands, whereas the Canadian growers, they like to export their bell peppers to the U.S.
If I could just add a point, it's Karen from The Grower. I know that there is an Indian entrepreneur in Prince Edward Island who is planting acres and acres of apples with the plan to export those to India. So I think those are some new trends that we will see more of in the years to come.
I have one final question, and I'd like everyone to take out their crystal ball and start thinking and looking at what 2017 may look like and what you feel the major story or trend may be as we move into the new year.
I'd be curious to see how discount retailers are going to make their way into the U.S. in 2017. And is that going to change consumer prices for fresh produce? We are definitely already seeing retailers, discount retailers in particular on the East Coast, but as they make their way into other parts of the U.S., I'd be curious to see, how that is going to impact fresh produce.
Yeah, that retail angle is going to be fascinating. I picked something different, and I'm not going to say it's the trend, but I am going to say we're going to start seeing a lot more of it in 2017, and that's automation. I think if the Trump administration deals with immigration the way American voters have responded by clamping down, there's going to be fewer people available to harvest crops. And I think we're going to start to see a much bigger investment in automation at the grower level in the produce industry. Example of that, we have a story on our site right now, which I just looked at the numbers this morning. It's our highest page view story, and it's about a automated strawberry picker that they're testing in Florida. So I know the industry is interested in that. And on the flip side of that, at the retail level, you're going to start seeing more automation there. You know, I go to Walmart every week to shop for my family, and they just switched over half their registers to self-check just in the last month. And so I think consumers will respond positively to that. And I don't think we should look at that as a bad thing in the fresh produce industry. I think that's just the natural course of being efficient in business as you can.
And I completely agree with Greg's point as well, and I think sort of looking to the next generation of growers is always something that's going to be at the forefront, sort of who's going to be taking on responsibilities going forward. I think this upcoming year in terms of trends, I'm looking forward to seeing some of the eating trends I've seen in CPG foods trickle down to produce. Snacking, for example, has been something that everyone has been talking about in 2016, and sort of some of the produce managers I've spoken to have said that they expect that to continue into 2017 with things like mini tomatoes and mini cucumbers, which are sort of taken from the mini carrots that were popular 10 years ago. So I think sort of that snacking trend in vegetable is going to be big in 2017.
Well, for all the media focus been witnessing on the United States and global affairs, I still think that domestic issues are going to pose the biggest threat to the Canadian horticultural industry in 2017. No one really knows what the impact of carbon taxes or cap and trade will be. And I'm certainly witnessing that growers are increasingly frustrated with the disconnect between government policies and their business reality on the ground. Various politicians are looking to agriculture and saying, look, we want you to generate more jobs. But I think from the growers' perspective, they're saying, well, there are finite limits on financing all of the changes to get there. I certainly agree with other comments that there's going to be a lot more work on automation, but that all costs money and to get there. So it remains an interesting question for how things will develop in the year and the years ahead.
Well, thank you, everyone. It is very valuable to reflect on the past and take that knowledge and have some perspective to look into the future. And hopefully that's what we've been able to do through this podcast. And I want to thank again Fresh Plaza, the packer, Canadian grocer, and the grower for participating, and each of you for giving your perspective of how you saw 2016 and your thoughts on where 2017 could take us.
And that's it. That's all that we have for you on this year's podcast. So I'd like to thank Marika Hemes from Fresh Plaza, Greg Johnson from The Packer, Megan Cashty from Canadian Grocer, and Karen Davidson from The Grower. The fact that you took time out of your schedule to come talk to us, that means so much to us, and we thank you again for making yourselves available to us. I'd like to thank Selena for letting us all know all about the Fresh Health Award, and I'd like to thank Ron for moderating the conversation. Now, I do want to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@cpma.ca. That's podcast@cpma.ca. And I want to know what your 2017 prediction is. What's the big story in produce for 2017? Where are we going? What's going to happen? I don't know. You tell me. Podcast@cpma.ca. Till next time, make a healthy choice. Fill half your plate with fruits and veggies.
You will now be disconnected by the moderator.